The processing center on Station Vel 9 hummed with the efficient brutality of bureaucracy. Hundreds of species lined up in their designated queues, each waiting for resource allocation, medical clearance, or travel permits. The air recyclers struggled against the mixture of methane breathers, oxygen users, and silicon-based life forms, creating an atmosphere that smelled of desperation and disinfectant. Mara Ellison stood in the human queue, her worn jacket identifying her as a freight hauler from the outer colonies. She'd been waiting for 3 hours to get her ship's cargo manifest approved, a simple task made complex by the Galactic Concordate's love of red tape. Her back ached, her coffee had gone cold an hour ago, and her patience was wearing thin. But it wasn't her own discomfort that made her step out of line. In the adjacent queue, reserved for Velkari citizens, a small form was being roughly handled by an enforcement drone. The creature was barely knee-high, covered in russet and gold fur that rippled with bioluminescent distress patterns. Rexel, as Mara would later learn, was a Velkari predator cat cub, a species known for their fierce warrior culture and strict social hierarchies. The cub clutched a data slate to its chest, its large amber eyes wide with fear. Four clawed fingers trembled as it tried to explain something to the hovering drone, but its voice was too small, too young to carry authority in this place built for adults. Violation registered, the drone announced in flat galactic standard. Queue position forfeited. Citizen Rexel is removed from processing. Penalty, 48-hour waiting period before re-entry. But my mother, the cub's translator crackled. She needs medicine. The prescription expires today. Irrelevant. You attempted to access adult processing queue without proper guardian designation. Mara watched as several Velkari adults in the same queue turned away, their ear tufts flattening in what she'd learned was their equivalent of a dismissive shrug. In their culture, a cub who couldn't maintain queue position wasn't worthy of assistance. It was a lesson. Harsh, but supposedly necessary. The human freight hauler looked at her own queue position, number 247, finally close to the front after 3 hours. Then she looked at the small predator cat being escorted away from the line, its bioluminescent spots flickering between orange distress and blue despair. "Aw, hell," Mara muttered. She stepped out of her queue. The monitoring system immediately flagged her departure. Human citizen Mara Ellison, you have abandoned queue position 247. Re-entry will require... Yeah, I know the rules, Mara said, walking quickly toward the enforcement drone that was herding Rexel toward the exit. Hey, tin can, hold up. The drone rotated its sensor array toward her. State your business, human. That cub, what exactly was the violation? Attempted access to adult queue without guardian present. Velkari law requires cubs under solar cycle 12 to be accompanied. Mara knelt down to Rexel's level. The cub's pupils dilated in surprise. Adults didn't usually make themselves smaller. In Velkari culture, it was a sign of either submission or threat, but the human's face showed neither. Instead, there was something the cub's young mind struggled to identify: concern. Your mom's sick? Mara asked gently. Rexel nodded, not trusting its voice. The translator picked up the gesture. And you need to get her prescription refilled before it expires? Another nod. The cub's spots flickered a confused purple. Why would an alien from another queue care? Mara stood up and turned to the drone. The kid needs a guardian, right? I'll be the guardian. The drone's processor's word. You are not Velkari. You have no legal kinship bond. You are not authorized. Check your concordant regulations, Section 4, Subsection 12, Paragraph 9, Mara interrupted. She'd hauled freight through enough stations to know the rules better than most bureaucrats. In absence of species-specific guardians, any concordate citizen of majority age may serve as temporary legal guardian for emergency medical situations. The kid's mom needs medicine. That's an emergency. I'm of age. I'm a citizen. I'm volunteering. The drone's lights flickered as it accessed the relevant statutes. Around them, other beings in various queues were starting to pay attention. A human stepping out of queue was unusual. A human voluntarily taking on another species' burden was unprecedented. Regulation confirmed, the drone finally admitted. However, you will be required to enter the Velkari queue. Your original queue position is forfeit. Current Valkyrie Q wait time, 7.3 hours. Mara felt her stomach drop. 7 hours. She'd lose her cargo deadline. The penalty fees would eat most of her profit from this run. But she looked down at Rexel, at those wide amber eyes that held just a spark of hope now, and she thought about her own mother, light years away, getting older every year while Mara hauled cargo through the dark. "Put us in line," she said. The administrative ripple this caused was immediate. Valkyrie adults in the queue stiffened, their ear tufts rising in surprise. This human, this prey species weakling from a world of soft gravity and softer values, was taking on a burden they had all refused. The shame of it prickled at their warrior pride. Rexil reached up and took Mara's calloused hand with its small paw. "Thank you," the translator said, but the cub's purring undertone needed no translation. They joined the Valkyrie queue together, and Mara pulled out her data pad to message her client about the delay. The response came quickly. Contract penalties would apply. She'd be working at a loss for this run. She sighed and pocketed the device. "Your mother is very sick?" Mara asked, making conversation to pass the time. "Plasma fever," Rexil explained, its spots shifting to a worried yellow. "The medicine keeps it controlled, but without it," the cub didn't finish, but it didn't need to. "We'll get it," Mara promised, "even if I have to carry you to the front of this line myself." Behind them, whispers spread through the Valkyrie queue in their native tongue, a language of growls and purrs that the translators struggled to capture. The human couldn't understand the words, but she caught their meaning in the way the Valkyrie stood straighter, their spots brightening with what might have been shame. An elderly Valkyrie, her fur silver with age, stepped forward. "Human," she said, her translator crisp with formal respect. "What you do brings honor to your species. It also brings shame to mine. A cub should not have needed an outsider's intervention." She turned to the queue. "We have forgotten the first principle. Strength is not shown by who we cast out, but by who we lift up." One by one, other Valkyrie began to step forward, offering their queue positions. The enforcement drone, unprepared for such collective action, could only watch as the queue reformed itself, moving Mara and Rexil steadily toward the front. Within 20 minutes, they stood at the processing window. The Valkyrie clerk looked at the human and the cub, at the unprecedented sight before her, and her spots flickered through a rainbow of emotions before settling on respectful green. "Prescription for Guardian Valkyrie Rex?" she asked. "Yes," Mara said firmly, "for my ward's mother." The medicine was dispensed, a simple crystalline inhaler that Rexil clutched like treasure. The cub looked up at Mara, spots blazing with gratitude orange. "Why did you help me?" Rexil asked. "Your queue, your time, your everything. Why?" Mara smiled and ruffled the fur between the cub's ears. "Because someone needed help, kid, and because where I come from, we judge our strength by how we treat the smallest among us, not by how efficiently we can ignore them." She knelt down one more time. "Now go. Get that medicine to your mom. And Rexil, when you grow up to be the big, strong Valkyrie warrior I know you'll become, remember this. Real strength isn't about standing alone. It's about knowing when to step out of line to help someone who can't stand at all." The cub nodded solemnly, hugged Mara's leg with surprising strength, and then bounded toward the station exit, medicine secured. Mara stood up, her back protesting, and checked the time. She'd have to run hard to make the minimum deadline, even with penalties. But as she walked toward the hangar bays, she passed dozens of Valkyrie who lowered their heads in respect, a gesture their species reserved for the most honored warriors. Word would spread through the Concordat. Humans were strange creatures, soft and weak by physical standards, but possessed of a different kind of strength. The kind that moved mountains not through force, but through the simple, radical act of giving a damn. And in the years to come, when the Galactic Concordat faced its darkest hour, they would remember. They would remember that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their ships or their strategy or their stubborn refusal to surrender. It was their bewildering, illogical, utterly unshakable insistence that everyone, even the smallest cub in the longest queue, mattered. That was the human way, and the galaxy would never be quite the same because of it.